They did not plan to fall in love with you. That is worth saying at the start, because it matters to understanding everything that follows. The avoidant does not enter connection with the intention of falling, does not approach intimacy with the openness that would make falling a natural outcome. The entire architecture of their relational life is oriented, however unconsciously, against exactly this, against the unplanned, uncontrolled, can't be managed back arrival of genuine love. And yet it happened, not gradually, not through the slow accumulation of positive experiences that wears down resistance over time. For the avoidant, genuine falling tends to arrive differently, as disruption, as the sudden recognition that something has gone through the system that the system was specifically designed to prevent from getting through. They looked at something in you, a specific thing, not the general accumulation of your qualities, not the overall impression of someone worth knowing, something particular, something that landed before the management protocol had time to intercept it, and the falling began. Understanding what that specific thing was, not as a formula to replicate, but as a genuine window into what the avoidance defended system cannot protect itself against, is what this is about. Why the avoidant falls unexpectedly, rather than gradually. Most people fall in love along a recognizable arc. Attraction develops, interest deepens, investment grows. The falling is visible to both people, traceable in its stages, something that can be tracked and discussed and navigated consciously. The avoidant does not fall this way. The avoidance system intercepts the ordinary falling before it can complete. The alarm fires when interest deepens past a certain threshold. The deactivating strategies engage when investment begins to feel real. The distance is created precisely when the falling would otherwise be happening. So the falling gets interrupted, managed, redirected back to something safer, which means the avoidant does not fall through the ordinary process of accumulating closeness. They fall through gaps in the defense, through moments when the system was not running at full capacity, through encounters that bypass the usual gatekeeping entirely, arriving from an unexpected direction, in an unexpected form, carrying a quality that the defense system had not been specifically configured to intercept. The unexpected falling is not a malfunction. It is the only kind of falling the avoidance system permits. The expected kind, the gradual, conscious, mutually acknowledged deepening, gets caught every time. Too visible, too manageable. The system sees it coming and responds accordingly. But the unexpected kind, the thing that arrives before the alarm has time to fire, the specific quality in you that landed in the place beneath the defense, that is what this is about. The quality that bypasses the defense, it is not your warmth. The avoidant has encountered warm people. The warmth is processed by the system as potential cost. Someone who will eventually want warmth returned in kind, in quantity, on a schedule the avoidant cannot reliably maintain. It is not your attractiveness. Physical attraction is processed and managed. The system knows how to be attracted to someone without being moved by them. It is not your intelligence, or your humor, or your kindness, or any of the qualities that make you genuinely worth knowing. The avoidant has encountered those things too. The system processes them as positive features of a person while simultaneously calculating the cost of getting close to that person. The quality that bypasses the defense is something more specific and more rare. It is the moment when you are completely, uncomplicatedly yourself, and it costs you nothing to be that. Not performed selfhood, not confidence displayed for effect, not the self-possession that is really a carefully maintained exterior over a quieter uncertainty, but the genuine, unself-conscious, not for anyone's benefit quality of someone who is simply, fully at home in who they are. It is visible in small moments more than large ones. The way you disagreed with something without needing to soften it into acceptability. The way you talked about something you loved without monitoring whether the loving was being received well. The way you were quiet without filling the quiet anxiously. The way you existed in your own presence without referencing it to anyone else's response. The avoidance system, which is constantly assessing the emotional environment for signals about what is expected, what is required, what the cost of continued engagement will be, encounters someone who is not sending those signals, who is not asking anything through their presence, who is not performing or requesting or calibrating, who is simply there. And the assessment protocol has nothing to assess. And in the absence of the usual incoming signals, the system does something it almost never does. It relaxes. And in the relaxing, the falling begins before the system realizes it should be preventing it. The specific moment it happened, there was a moment. You may or may not have been aware of it. It may have felt, from your side, entirely ordinary. A moment in which you were not trying to make an impression, not performing the best version of yourself, not doing anything that would register as significant in the context of the relationship. You were simply being. Maybe you were absorbed in something you found genuinely interesting, and the absorption was complete enough that you forgot temporarily to monitor how you appeared. Maybe you said something honest and slightly inconvenient, a genuine opinion that did not defer to the social atmosphere, without the softening that politeness usually installs. Maybe you laughed without editing the laugh. Maybe you were visibly moved by something small and did not immediately manage the being moved into something less exposed. Something in you was simply present, unguarded, not directed at the avoidant or calibrated for their reception, simply alive in your own experience, without an audience in mind. And the avoidant saw it, not saw it in the casual sense of observed it, saw it in the specific sense of being reached by it, of having it arrive in the place their defenses were not covering, because the defenses were not expecting anything to arrive from that direction. Your simple presence, your genuine selfhood, your unself-conscious inhabiting of your own experience. That is what got through. And it got through because it was not trying to get through. It was not aimed at them. It had nothing to do with them. It was simply you being yourself in that ordinary moment. And the avoidant, whose nervous system has been scanning every incoming signal for evidence of what is being required of them, encountered something that required nothing, that asked for no response, that was simply, freely, without agenda or expectation, real, and fell. Why this specific quality is the one. The avoidant's primary fear in intimate relationship is not pain in the generic sense. It is the specific pain of losing themselves, of having their selfhood gradually subsumed by the weight of another person's need, of becoming someone's foundation, their primary emotional resource, the person whose presence is required for another person's functioning. This fear is old. It was installed in an environment where being needed felt like being trapped, where the emotional demands of others arrived without adequate regard for the avoidant's own interior experience, where closeness was associated with the loss of autonomy rather than its expansion. And so the avoidance system, ever since, has been vigilant for the signs of impending engulfment, the slight lean that suggests someone is organizing around them, the warmth that carries underneath it the implicit question of reciprocation, the interest that is, at some level, instrumental, directed at the avoidant in the service of the interested person's need for connection. Most people, most of the time, send some version of these signals, not manipulatively, simply as the natural expression of wanting connection. Connection requires some orientation toward the other person, some investment in how the other person responds, some degree of the self being arranged, at least partially around the presence of the other. The avoidant reads all of this, processes it as the early evidence of future cost. But you, in that specific, unguarded, unself-conscious moment of simply being yourself, were sending none of it. You were not oriented toward them, not organized around their response, not asking anything through the quality of your presence. You were oriented toward the thing itself, the conversation, the experience, the thought you were having, the moment you were in, fully there, not there in relation to them. And the avoidant, encountering someone who is fully present without being oriented toward them, experience something their system has no prepared response to, someone who is not a potential engulfment, someone whose presence does not carry the implicit cost that all presence to the avoidance system has always carried, someone who is simply free. And the freedom in you reached the place in them where the wanting for freedom lives, the place that has been longing, underneath all the defense, for exactly this, for closeness that does not cost autonomy, for presence that does not require performance, for love that does not arrive as weight. You are not weight. In that moment, in the specific quality of your unself-conscious being, you were the opposite of weight, and the avoidant fell toward you the way things fall toward the opposite of what they have been bracing against, completely, unexpectedly, before they knew it was happening. What they did with the falling here is where the story becomes complicated, where the unexpected falling meets the very system that was designed to prevent it. Because the falling, once recognized, once the avoidant became aware that something had gotten through, that the assessment protocol had failed, that they were undeniably and against every intention, genuinely moved by you, the system re-engaged. Not immediately. There was a period, perhaps brief, in which the falling was simply experienced, in which the usual alarm was quiet enough that the feeling could be felt without immediately generating the counter-response, in which the avoidant was perhaps for the first time in a long time, simply in love, without the management, without the calculation of cost. That period is the one that both of you probably remember with particular clarity, the early phase, when the connection felt different from anything that had come before, when the avoidant was genuinely fully present in a way that felt rare and real and unlike the managed warmth they were capable of in other contexts. Because it was different, the falling had bypassed the system. And without the system running its full management protocol, what was present between you was the avoidant's actual self, not the defended version, not the self-sufficient performance, but the genuine interior of someone who was, in this unexpected falling, more fully alive than their ordinary management of themselves allows. And then the recognition arrived, the awareness that the falling had happened, that someone had gotten through, that the stakes were now real, and the system re-engaged, not as a decision, as the automatic, practiced, deeply grooved response of a nervous system that registered genuine attachment and produced, as it always produces in response to genuine attachment, the alarm. The warmth cooled slightly. The presence became slightly more managed. The full, unguarded quality of the early phase began to be replaced by something more careful, not because the falling stopped. The falling had not stopped, but because the system, now aware of the falling, was working to contain it, to manage it into something that felt less like the loss of control but genuine love, for the avoidant always feels like. What you saw that confused you from your side, the shift was visible but not comprehensible. The person who had been so present became slightly less present. The warmth that had seemed so genuine began to carry a slightly managed quality. The openness that had felt like the defining characteristic of the connection began to have occasional edges, moments of withdrawal, of cooler temperature, of a quality that you could not name but that registered as something guarded, where there had been something open. And you, understandably, began to wonder what you had done, whether something had changed in how you were showing up, whether the quality that had initially produced the connection was now somehow absent from what you were bringing, whether you had, somehow, become less of whatever you had been in the beginning. The answer to all of those questions is no. You had not changed. What had changed was not you, but the avoidance relationship to their own falling. The early phase, when the falling was unexpected and the system had not yet re-engaged, produced the fullness of their presence. The later phase, when the system recognized what had happened and attempted to manage it, produced the cooled, slightly more careful version. The quality in you that produced the falling was still there, is still there. The unself-conscious selfhood, the genuine presence, the being yourself without cost to yourself, none of that changed. What changed was the avoidance ability to be with it without the alarm running alongside the appreciation. Why the quality that made them fall is the same quality that unsettles them here is the specific irony at the center of this experience. The thing in you that bypassed their defenses and produced the unexpected falling, the unself-conscious, fully inhabited, oriented toward yourself rather than toward them quality, is the same thing that makes sustaining the love difficult for their system. Because that quality, however much it disarms the defense initially, also prevents the avoidant from doing something their system finds stabilizing in intimate relationships, making themselves necessary. The avoidance system, for all its stated preference for independence, finds a specific and paradoxical comfort in being needed, not the overt need that activates the alarm, not the engulfing, dependency-creating need that produces retreat, but the subtle, ongoing sense that their presence matters to someone's functioning, that they have a defined role, that the relationship has a shape that includes them as a significant part of the architecture. When you are fully, genuinely, not organized around them present in your own life, when your stability is clearly internal rather than contingent on them, they cannot locate that stabilizing sense. They cannot find the defined role. They are not necessary in the way that feels, however paradoxically, anchoring. And so the quality that made them fall also keeps them slightly off balance, slightly uncertain of their place, slightly unable to settle into the relationship with the ease that might allow the alarm to quiet. The love is real. The unsettledness is also real. Both are direct consequences of the same quality in you. Understanding this does not resolve it, but it clarifies something important. The confusion the avoidant seems to have about what they want is not confusion about you. It is the specific disorientation of someone who found the thing they needed and is simultaneously unsettled by the same qualities that make it what it is. What this means for you now, the quality in you that made them fall unexpectedly, is not something to be managed, modified, or strategically deployed. It is simply you, the unself-conscious, fully inhabited, genuinely present version of you that was visible in that moment when you were simply being yourself without audience. The most useful thing that can be said about what to do with this understanding is not about the avoidant at all. It is about protecting that quality in yourself, because the dynamic, the avoidance, warmth and withdrawal, and the confusion it produces has a way of eroding exactly this quality over time, of making you more self-conscious, more monitoring of how you appear, more calibrated to their response, more aware of yourself as someone being watched and assessed and responded to. That self-consciousness is the opposite of what made them fall, and it is the natural, understandable, entirely human consequence of being in a relationship where the other person's response is intermittent and difficult to read. You become more watchful, more careful, more edited, and in becoming more edited, you move away from the quality that reached them. The protection of your own unself-conscious selfhood, the maintenance of the genuine, uncalibrated, not for their benefit quality of your own presence, is the most important thing available to you in this dynamic. Not for their sake, for yours, because that quality is the most genuinely you thing you carry. It is the thing that reaches people who are worth being reached. It is the thing that produces real connection rather than managed approximations of connection. It is, in the most fundamental sense, what you have to offer, not to the avoidant specifically, to love, to connection, to the people and experiences and moments that constitute a life that is fully, genuinely, unself-consciously lived. Protect it, not as a strategy, as the basic, necessary, irreplaceable act of remaining yourself. That is what made them fall. And it is worth far more than any falling it produces. It is the whole of what you are, and it is enough. It has always been enough. This avoidant has fallen in love with you unexpectedly when they saw this in you. Continued. Something worth slowing down for before continuing. Everything said so far is accurate as a portrait of avoidant psychology, the unexpected falling, the quality that bypasses the defense. The specific irony of the thing that made them fall also being the thing that unsettles them. These are real patterns, grounded in genuine attachment research and recognizable in real human experience. But there is a question worth asking directly. How much of this is actually serving you? Not the understanding itself. The understanding is genuine value, but the ongoing, deepening, increasingly nuanced exploration of what made the avoidant fall, what they experienced, what their system did with the falling. At what point does this become less about clarity and more about a sophisticated form of staying close to something that may not be available to you in the form you need? That question deserves honest engagement, not a defensive response, not reassurance that understanding is always useful, genuine consideration of whether, at this particular moment in your particular life, more analysis of their interior is what you actually need. What follows attempts to be genuinely useful rather than simply more thorough. What? The falling actually changed, and what it didn't, the avoidant fell for you unexpectedly. That is real. The quality in you that bypassed their defense reached something genuine in them. The love that resulted is not manufactured or convenient or the ordinary warmth of a pleasant connection. It is real love, specific to you, refusing to resolve in the way the management protocol expects it to resolve. And it changed something in them, changed the interior landscape, left a mark that their ordinary distance-creating strategies have not successfully erased. What it did not change, and this is the part that needs to be said plainly, is their capacity. Capacity is different from feeling. Feeling is what happened when you bypass the defense. Capacity is what determines whether the feeling can be sustained in daily contact, whether the alarm can be tolerated rather than immediately acted upon, whether showing up consistently in the ordinary, unglamorous Tuesday afternoon texture of an actual relationship is something their system can currently support. The falling changed what they feel. It did not automatically change what they can do with what they feel. That distinction is not a small one. It is the difference between someone who loves you and someone who can be in a relationship with you. Those two things overlap often enough that we tend to assume they are the same. In the avoidant dynamic, they are frequently not. The person who fell for you unexpectedly may genuinely love you and still be in their current state, unable to be the partner the love would require, not because the love is insufficient, because the infrastructure for sustaining love, the capacity to stay present when the alarm fires, to choose closeness when distance is available, to show up consistently rather than only in the moments when the missing becomes too large to manage. That infrastructure is built through different work than falling. Falling happens to them. Capacity is built by them. And the building of capacity is work that exists entirely outside your influence. The specific thing you cannot do, you cannot build their capacity for them. This sounds obvious. It is not, in practice, obvious at all. Because the impulse to help build it, to create the conditions that make it easier, to be patient in a way that gives them more time, to manage your own expression in ways that reduce the demand on their system, that impulse is natural and comes from genuine love. But it does not work. And understanding why it does not work is important. When you modify yourself to reduce the demand on their system, when you become less expressive, less needing, less fully present in order to lower the activation of their alarm, you are not building their capacity. You are reducing the requirement for it. There is a significant difference. Capacity is built through exposure, through the repeated experience of feeling the alarm fire and choosing to stay anyway. Through the accumulated evidence, the closeness does not produce the catastrophic loss of self that the nervous system predicts. Through the slow, non-linear, requires actual therapeutic work process of the alarm becoming less loud because it has been repeatedly demonstrated to be responding to a threat that does not materialize. None of that building happens when you make yourself smaller to reduce the trigger. The alarm simply has fewer occasions to fire, which means fewer occasions for the avoidant to practice staying through the firing, which means the capacity remains exactly where it was, undeveloped, untested, as insufficient as it was before you began accommodating it. Your accommodation, however loving, is not support for their growth. It is, in the most concrete sense, a substitution for it. And the cost of that substitution is paid by you in the currency of your own self-expression, your own fullness, your own genuine presence in the relationship. What the avoidant needs that you cannot provide. The avoidant who has fallen for you unexpectedly needs something specific in order to become capable of the love they feel. They need to face it, not manage it, not contain it, not create sufficient distance that the feeling remains theoretically present, but practically unthreatening. Face it directly, with a specific and uncomfortable willingness to sit in the anxiety that genuine intimacy produces, without immediately reaching for the distance that relieves the anxiety. That facing requires something that does not happen in the context of the relationship itself. It requires the internal work of understanding why the alarm fires and what it is actually responding to, and whether the threat it predicts is real or remembered. It requires, for most people, a therapeutic relationship that provides the container for that exploration. It requires time and repetition, and the specific kind of support that comes from someone whose job is to hold the space for exactly this. It does not require you to be more patient, or more understanding, or more accommodating of the distance. It requires them to be more willing, more honest with themselves, more committed to the work of becoming available than to the comfort of the distance. That willingness is entirely theirs to generate. You cannot inspire it into being, cannot create the conditions that make it inevitable, cannot love them into it. And recognizing that fully, without the softening that makes it feel less absolute than it is one of the most important things you can do. Not for the relationship, for yourself, because the recognition allows you to stop spending energy on something that was never within your capacity to provide. The honest assessment of where this leads, this is where the script needs to be genuinely useful rather than simply validating. The avoidant fell for you unexpectedly. The love is real. The quality in you that produced it is genuine and significant and worth honoring as yours rather than as a relational strategy. Now, practically, where does this lead? It leads one of two places. The first place, the one that requires the most from them, is genuine change. The avoidant, confronted with love that is real and a system that cannot hold it, chooses to address the system, does the work, develops the capacity, becomes, slowly and imperfectly and non-linearly, someone who can be present in the relationship with the consistency that genuine intimacy requires. This happens, not rarely, but not commonly either. It requires the specific combination of self-awareness, willingness, and available support that not every avoidant has access to at every point in their life. When it happens, it produces something genuinely different from what the original dynamic was capable of. The second place, the more common one, is a sustained version of what has already been happening. The love remains real and the capacity remains insufficient, and the distance continues to be created, and the signals continue to be sent, and the relationship exists in the suspended, unresolved, periodically warm, and periodically cold state that characterizes the avoidant dynamic when the avoidant has not done the work. In this second place, you have a choice, not a dramatic choice, the ordinary, daily, repeated choice of what you do with your time and attention and the love that is still present in you. You can remain oriented toward the avoidant, toward the possibility of the first place, toward the hope that the work will happen and the capacity will develop and what is currently insufficient will become sufficient. Or you can redirect, not abandon the love. The love does not require management, but redirect the primary orientation of your daily life toward what is actually available to you, toward the people and experiences and work that are genuinely present rather than theoretically possible. That choice is yours, not the avoidance, not contingent on what they do or don't do or feel or don't feel. Yours, and making it, actually making it, not performing it, requires being honest about which place you are currently in and whether you are willing to remain there indefinitely. The quality in you beyond the falling, the quality that made them fall, the unself-conscious, genuine, fully inhabited selfhood, deserves more than being the thing that reached an avoidant. It deserves to be the thing that shaped your entire life, not just the quality that appeared in the moment they happened to witness. The ongoing, daily, consistently expressed truth of how you move through the world when you are not being watched and not calibrating and not monitoring the effect of your presence on someone who matters to you. That quality, expressed fully and consistently, is not just attractive to avoidants who are not expecting to fall. It is the foundation of a genuinely good life, of friendships that are real rather than managed, of work that is engaged rather than performed, of daily experience that has the texture of someone who is actually present in it rather than partially elsewhere. The unself-conscious selfhood was not produced for the relationship. It predates the relationship. It will outlast the relationship in whatever form the relationship's conclusion takes. It is yours, completely, in every context, not just the contexts where the avoidant happened to notice it. And the most genuinely useful thing this conversation can offer, more useful than any further analysis of avoidant psychology, more relevant than any additional insight into what the falling means and why it happened and what the system did with it, is this: go be that person, fully, in every available context. Not as a strategy for anything, not as a demonstration of growth or a signal of availability or a move designed to produce a particular response in someone who may or may not be paying attention. Simply because that is who you actually are, and who you actually are deserves to be fully expressed in the life that is genuinely yours, in the relationships that are actually available, in the ordinary, irreplaceable, happening right now moments of a life that is real, not waiting to be confirmed by someone else's unexpected falling, already confirmed by the simple fact of being yours. That is enough. It has always been enough, and it is more than enough to build a life on, a genuinely good one, starting now. This avoidant has fallen in love with you unexpectedly when they saw this in you. There is something that needs to be said before adding more words to this. Not a correction, not a reversal of what has already been established, but an honest acknowledgement of something that has been present throughout this conversation and deserves to be named directly rather than continued around. This is a lot of time spent inside someone else's psychology, not wasted time. The understanding is real, and the insights are accurate, and the validation of an experience that is genuinely disorienting has genuine value. None of that is being retracted, but there is a point at which the accumulation of psychological insight about someone who is not available to you in the way you need becomes its own form of the thing it is describing. The avoidant creates distance and stays in it. The person who loves the avoidant creates understanding and stays in it. Different mechanisms, similar result. A life that is primarily organized around someone who is not fully present in it. So what follows is going to be less about the avoidant psychology and more about yours. Not as a pivot away from what is true, as the honest completion of what all this understanding has been building toward. The thing the falling revealed about you, not them. The conversation so far has been about what the avoidant saw in you that made them fall. The unself-conscious selfhood, the genuine presence, the quality of someone who exists without referencing their existence to someone else's response. But there is another angle on this worth examining. What does it say about you that this is the quality they saw? Because that quality, the unself-conscious, genuinely inhabited, not performing version of yourself, is not something that appears in every moment. It appears when you are sufficiently at ease in your own experience that the monitoring stops, when the self-consciousness that accompanies being perceived by someone who matters to you drops away long enough for the real thing to surface. The avoidant saw it in a moment when you forgot to be watched, which means the rest of the time, or a significant portion of it, you were aware of being watched, were calibrating, however subtly, to their perception, were bringing a version of yourself that had, somewhere in the background of its presentation, an awareness of how it was landing. This is not a criticism. It is the ordinary human experience of being in a relationship with someone whose response matters to you. Self-consciousness in the presence of someone we care about is not a flaw. It is the natural consequence of caring. But it is worth noticing, because the gap between the self-conscious version and the unself-conscious version, between the you that was being perceived and the you that forgot to monitor the perception, is the gap that the avoidant fell toward. The unmonitored version was the one that reached them, which raises a question worth sitting with. What would it take for the unmonitored version to be the consistent one? Not in the specific context of this relationship, in your life generally, in your daily experience of moving through the world, in the ordinary moments that are not charged with the particular self-consciousness of being close to someone whose opinion of you matters enormously. Are you generally, in your life, as unself-consciously yourself as you were in that specific moment? Or is the unmonitored version rare, something that surfaces only when the monitoring drops by accident? This question is not about the avoidant. It is entirely about you, about the quality of your daily self-experience, about whether the version of yourself that is most fully alive, most genuinely present, most completely at ease, is readily accessible, or whether it requires a specific set of conditions to emerge. The self-consciousness that developed inside this dynamic here is something that happens inside the avoidant dynamic that is rarely acknowledged directly. The intermittent warmth, the push and pull, the closeness followed by distance, the presence followed by withdrawal, produces, over time, a specific kind of heightened self-consciousness in the person on the receiving end. Because when someone's warmth is unpredictable, you start paying very close attention to what precedes the warmth and what precedes the withdrawal. You start looking for the pattern, the thing you did or said, or that produced the closing versus the opening, the version of yourself that seemed to be received versus the version that seemed to trigger the retreat. And over time, that attention, however understandable, however survival-oriented, produces a person who is more monitored in their self-expression than they were before, more aware of being perceived, more calibrated to the emotional environment, more self-conscious in exactly the way that was absent in the moment the avoidant fell for you. The dynamic, in other words, erodes the quality that produced the falling. This is not the avoidant's fault in any deliberate sense. It is simply what intermittent reinforcement does to the person receiving it. It produces vigilance, and vigilance is the enemy of the unself-conscious selfhood that was there in the beginning. So the quality that made them fall, that they are still in their interior, responding to and missing and reaching toward through the signals, is the same quality that the relationship, in its actual texture, was quietly dismantling. Understanding this is useful not as a reason to blame the dynamic or the avoidant or yourself, but as a clear-eyed recognition of what the relationship was doing to something in you that matters beyond this relationship. The vigilance that developed here, the heightened self-monitoring, the calibration of your expression to someone else's unpredictable response, these are things worth actively undoing. Not for the avoidant, not to restore the quality that made them fall, for the quality of your own daily experience, for the unself-conscious selfhood that deserves to be consistently available rather than something that surfaces only in the moments when you forget to be watched. The practical work of recovering unself-consciousness. This is where the conversation needs to move from insight to something more concrete, because recovering the unself-conscious version of yourself, the one that was visible in the moment the avoidant fell, is not accomplished through more understanding. Understanding is what has been happening. The recovery requires something different. It requires practice in low-stakes presence. This sounds almost too simple. It is not simple in practice. Low-stakes presence means putting yourself in situations where the monitoring drops because there is nothing significant riding on the outcome, where you are not being assessed by someone whose assessment matters enormously, where the social environment is safe enough that the vigilance that developed in the dynamic is not triggered. These situations are different for different people. For some, it is time alone and genuine absorption, working on something interesting, moving through nature, cooking, creating. The context in which the self forgets to monitor, because there is no one watching whose opinion matters. For others, it is certain friendships, the specific relationships that have the quality of genuine safety, where you are known well enough and consistently enough received that the calibration drops, and what is present is simply you, unedited. The point is not the specific context. The point is accumulating time in the unmonitored state, building the familiarity with your own unself-conscious presence so that it becomes more reliably accessible, less dependent on specific conditions, less something that surfaces only when you forget to be watched, and more something that is simply how you are. That recovery is gradual. It does not happen through a decision. It happens through the repeated, low-pressure experience of being in your own presence without monitoring it, through the slow re-establishment of comfort with your own company, through the specific and unglamorous practice of being yourself without an audience, until being yourself without an audience is simply the default. What gets built in the recovery of unself-conscious selfhood, is not only about returning to a previous state, it is about building something that was not fully present before the dynamic either, because the self-consciousness that the dynamic produced, however unwelcome, also produced a specific kind of self-knowledge that was not as available before. The forced attention to your own expression and its effects, the mapping of your own emotional responses under pressure, the understanding arrived at through real experience rather than theory of what you actually need in intimate relationship and what you will not again quietly absorb. The recovery integrates that knowledge. Not back to the person you were before this dynamic. That person did not have what you now have. Forward into a version of yourself that has the unself-conscious quality and the self-knowledge simultaneously. The ease of someone who is genuinely at home in themselves, combined with the clarity of someone who has been through something real and knows in their body, rather than just their mind, what they are and are not willing to organize their life around. That combination, ease and clarity, unself-consciousness, and genuine self-knowledge, is not something most people have. It is the specific, hard-won product of having been through exactly what you have been through and having chosen, rather than remaining in the aftermath indefinitely, to integrate it. The integration is the work, and the work is worth doing not because it will produce a particular outcome with the avoidant, because it produces a particular quality of daily life that is genuinely better than any alternative available. The life that the unself-conscious you is capable of here is what the unself-conscious, genuinely inhabited, fully present version of you is capable of, that the self-monitoring version is not. Actual enjoyment of the present moment, the specific, irreplaceable, cannot be manufactured experience of being in something, a conversation, an activity, an ordinary afternoon, without the background processing of how it is being perceived or what it means or whether it is moving in the right direction. The simple animal pleasure of being present in your own life, without agenda, genuine connection with people who are actually available. The unself-conscious version of you makes a specific kind of contact with other people that the monitored version cannot make. Because the monitored version is always partially elsewhere, in the assessment, in the calculation, in the monitoring of the dynamic. The unmonitored version is simply there, with the person in front of them, available for actual encounter rather than managed proximity. Creative and intellectual engagement that is not contaminated by performance. The work that matters to you, whatever form it takes, has a different quality when the self forgets to monitor. The ideas come differently. The engagement is deeper. The sense of absorption that is one of the most reliably satisfying human experiences becomes accessible again in a way that vigilance prevents. And love, eventually, when it is the right time and the right person. The love that the unself-conscious version of you is capable of, genuine, unguarded, freely chosen, not contaminated by the vigilance that this dynamic installed, is the most real version of what you have to offer. It is the version that reaches people, that makes real contact, that produces genuine intimacy rather than the managed approximation of it. That love is not a future destination. It is the natural expression of the unself-conscious selfhood that is already in you. That has always been in you. That was visible in the moment the avoidant fell, and is visible in different forms in different contexts whenever the monitoring drops and what is genuinely there surfaces. It is there now, underneath the vigilance the dynamic installed, underneath the self-consciousness that developed in the repeated experience of someone's warmth being unpredictable. Underneath all of it, waiting not to be recovered, waiting to be lived. That is the work. Simple in its direction, ongoing in its practice, entirely, irreducibly yours, not for anyone's falling, for your own standing, in the life that is completely, unself-consciously, genuinely yours. That is what all of this has been about. That is what it was always about.